Why do people continue to move to Florida and live in Florida when there are hurricanes every single year? I moved out of Florida last year, lived there for 33 years, lived through the 24 hurricane season, Irma, Ian, and everything in between. Lived on the Gulf Coast for 22 years. Milton is the first hurricane that's ever made me legitimately nervous. It's not that you get used to it, or you get jaded, or it isn't a big deal, it is. But it's like asking why people live in Tornado Alley or places that see landslides and brush fires. It's weather that exists. We've seen hurricanes hit and devastate other states. Sandy wasn't that bad by Florida standards, and it was catastrophic for NJ. Helene was devastated for NC and TN. The Caribbean is affected each year, usually multiple times by hurricanes. Because sunshine and no state income tax hit different. The same reason the Japanese keep rebuilding after Godzilla fuck shit up. It's home. People act like the entire state gets wiped off the face of the planet every year. 99.999999 of people have very few long-term consequences from storms each year. Anything less than a 3 is unlikely to cause any significant damage. The larger storms, it's only the immediate coastal areas most of the time. The footage they show on TV is always the worst of the worst they can find. Unless you live in an area that floods, you are very unlikely to have any significant damage even if a storm hits you directly. For most people, in most cases, it's a long thunderstorm. I've lost power longer in a random storm in Massachusetts last year than I ever did in a hurricane living in Florida for almost 40. For some really unlucky coastal folks, it's bad. For pretty much everyone else, it's a nuisance you need to deal with every few years. Work. My sister and brother-in-law have lived in Florida for 25 years. The company that he works for has a major facility near Port Canaveral, and one of their customers is NASA. They have never experienced a direct hit but have had close encounters. They have had some minor damage, but nothing that made their home uninhabitable. A condo they also own did experience significant damage, as did all of the other units in the building. They have made their house hurricane resistant to a reasonable level, and if ordered to evacuate would do so. They are far enough inland to be protected from storm surges, at least so far, thanks in part to Cape Canaveral and Merritt Island. Ironically, they are on their way back to Florida from Canada right now and are about a day away from home. They will be staying in a hotel in Alabama until it is safe and possible to return. Pretty much everywhere has inherent risks. Earthquakes, wildfires, tornadoes, blizzards. Florida experiences hurricanes every year, but not everywhere in Florida does every single year. Because, unless you somehow live in every county in the state simultaneously, you don't get hit with a hurricane every year. There are very few places in the USA that do not suffer some form of natural disaster. That's like asking, why do you take the highway when there are car crashes every day? The benefits outweigh the risks for most people. Nowhere on earth is safe. The real problem is that you no longer can get insurance on your house unless you are willing to pay outrageous sums of money, and sometimes then you still can't. It's a terrible financial investment to buy property in Florida near the coast at the moment, as when your house floods you're gonna foot the entire bill, and that's gonna bankrupt most people. Have you been to Florida when it's nice? That's why. Why do people live in Oklahoma when there are tornadoes every year? Why do people live in California with earthquakes or New England with snowstorms? Every location comes with risks. You just have to decide if jobs, schools, family, etc. outweigh those risks. I've lived in Florida and multiple states in the Midwest. Midwest winters suck, and the cost of living in many places in Florida aren't really much higher than they are in the Midwest. Plus, in the Midwest, there are tornadoes, the New Madrid fault freaking quakes, and thunderstorms that can potentially do almost as much wind hail ECT non-storm surge though damage as hurricanes. People have to deal with weather bullshit anywhere they live. Why not live somewhere that isn't as costly as SoCal, but has super mild winters and no state income tax? Why do people live anywhere where bad things might happen? Because bad things happen everywhere. I live in a cold climate. I might hit a patch of black ice and die in a car accident. Should I move? Because hurricanes really aren't that bad. Usually. The Mummy roller coaster at Universal Studios. Jacksonville has been direct hit by a major hurricane once in my 28 years of life. The same reason people live anywhere. Weather, family, home, work, politics. A lot of houses are extremely hurricane resistant. It's a blip of the year where they get absolutely pelted. But most of the time you board things up, prepare some food, wait it out, then clean it up. Occasionally you leave and pick up the pieces. Very rarely you die or your home and belongings are all destroyed. People choose to drive every day and you risk plenty with that too. It's just a part of life. Lots of places get hit with hurricanes. Some earthquakes. Some tornadoes. I can kind of answer this. After my parents divorced, my mom moved to Florida because 1. No state income tax. 2. She bought a nicer trailer home in a 55 community for $50K. That's nearly impossible in our area. 3. The cost of living where she went was too much higher than where she was. 4. She genuinely loves beaches. TLDR, my mom saved 6 on tax and got a cheap house there. You can golf in 70-degree weather all winter. And California has wildfires and earthquakes. And the Great Plains have tornadoes. And the Northeast and Midwest have blizzards. And the Southwest has droughts. People live in or move to those places because that's what they are familiar with, and it's where they've built their lives. Uncertainty isn't something you can entirely avoid by relocating.